Yes, welcome back. This is A RAP CRITIC. I'm your boy Malik 16 from Plates and Crates. And no, I am not that, which brings apocalypse to this game called rap. I'd like to think that I actually bring some sense of balance to this game, and I hope you all agree. And I lied though. I did lie. In the previous episode 16, I was referencing episode 15.5, which was the special birthday edition, and I said we probably won't ever do an episode that long. I lied because this Rascast episode, this episode 17, wound up being an hour-long special because we switched the format a little. So, you know, I think I may have mentioned it. If not, then I'm mentioning it now. Moving forward, I'm actually gonna have guests give their ratings as we go, which is gonna make the videos a little bit longer, but if you'd like to subscribe to the channel so far, you must like it enough, you must like me enough to sit here and listen to, you know, somebody really analyze and break down these albums for you and prompt you to do the same. And thank you for joining on the ride. Like, it only gets better. The guests get more interesting and intricate and in the detail. And if you're alone and you're doing it at home, then you know what it is and the time flies. So, sorry, I'm not a liar, but I may have lied. Technically, I think I said I don't think we'll do an episode that long, but you get what I'm saying. All right, with no further ado, this is category 2, where we go over the rap performance on the album, and we're still talking about none other than the classic from 1996 as we come to the close of our 1996 for the rest of the year campaign. We're talking about Mobb Deep's Hell on Earth, all right? If we're talking about category 2, then the first dimension we go into is dimension 1, personality and charisma. How much personality and charisma were being exhibited by the rappers here, Mobb Deep, Havoc, and Prodigy, on this particular album? And so it gets interesting because I think historically Havoc has caught a lot of flack or just not gotten a lot of the shine that he deserved as a rapper on the mic, because in a group with two, you know, we mentioned this before, people always feel a little compelled to pick one. And unless it's super homogenous. And Mobb Deep, while they're on the same agenda, they're two distinct entities. And Prodigy, if you had to label the personality that is presented on wax, it's brazen, you know. So where they may be saying the same things, you know, we take a song like Drop a Gem on them, for example, where they're going at Pac or they're answering Pac back. Havoc actually says more things that are direct references to Tupac than Prodigy. Prodigy doesn't really get, you know, his verse could have been to anyone if you're really like reading it until you get to about the last few lines, maybe the last 4 bars where he references the 1994 robbery and shooting. And, you know, Havoc goes a little harder, but those things get overlooked because Prodigy has the reputation for saying more outlandish, wild things and descriptive things. Havoc stuff just seems to kind of get blended in with everything else he's saying. You know, sometimes the ending bar is a little like harsh, and that's where you get like, oh, okay. But Prodigy does that throughout his verses. So I think the other part is that Havoc takes more of a laid back stance. And that allows Prodigy's brazenness to shine more, because this is my man, I'm riding with him, but I'm not trying to do what he's doing. You know, I'll let him go and do that, but I'm on the same accord. So, you know, that's what you get with the personalities, Havoc being the straight man and Prodigy being the more rah-rah, even though they're both pretty calm with this grim tone that they bring on their album. So it's not that they're rah-rah in projection, it's words and how it comes across. And you know, I think that's about the extent of personality you get. You're not getting, you know, a lot of autobiographical material here, so you're not learning a lot about backstory. If you, you know, I mentioned Prodigy's book, My Infamous Life, and you learn a lot that goes along with some of these songs and things going on around the time that these songs were made. But personality, something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats, which takes us to dimension 2, the suspension of disbelief or the believability factor, right? So never on a Mobb Deep album are you being asked for suspension of disbelief. The format is always in the vein of you know, understanding that they are telling you this is real, it's the real, this is what we really do, and they go out of their way to remind you this is real and this can happen. There's gonna be skits, there's gonna be talking, there's gonna be, you know, in the lyrics, bold statements to assert that. And, you know, their detractors over the years would accuse them of outright lying. You know, they also have this reputation of not being what they say they are on wax. And so that always comes down to the question of how much you believe Mobb Deep with this ultra violent, you know, we talked about this being a super dark, and, you know, these guys creating, you know, this New York gritty, violent rap wave where, you know, rap and violence, nothing new, but it's their particular brand where they're descriptive and cruddy without going the hardcore route. They tote this line, between street and hardcore. So not quite to that extent where it's crazy. And so, you know, you get things like right at the beginning of G.O.D. Father Part 3, this long, you know, skit of you can't avoid, you gotta fast forward if you don't want to hear it. It's a part of the song. And, you know, they're looking out the window wondering if the person that they were beefing with is out there right now. He happens to be out there. Someone's like, pass me the gun. And there's an excessive amount of gunshot sounds that is supposed to simulate shooting your enemy out the window. And this is where, you know, this is why I say things like, no one can tell me that hip hop does not promote violence at times, because this is a grand example. If ever they wanted to use this album in court at any time, you know, this would have been a smoking gun, no pun intended, but excessive, no less than like 15 shots for no reason, just at the beginning of the song to, you know, again, showcase the realness, how gangster, how willing to go and do anything to an enemy they were. And so things like that over the years tend to kind of give them this reputation. Okay, guys, we don't believe you need more people. But it didn't stop them. This is their brand. This is what they do. They double down on it. So it's either you believe Mobb Deep or you don't. And I think over time, there's enough stories to corroborate and enough stories to, you know, dispel. And it's up to you which side you lean more towards when it comes to Mobb Deep. Because you know, it's possible for two things to be true at the same time, right? You can have your chain stolen and still, you know, buck at somebody to get your chain back. So something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. How much do you believe Mobb Deep on this album? Very descriptive with the violence and, you know, very brazen, bold statements that come get me. All right, so dimension 3, the delivery and use of voice. All right, we talked about Havoc being the perfect accomplished, your road dog, your best Cody. And the reason that works in an audio context is because Havoc and Prodigy's voices complement each other perfectly. While Havoc has his own menacing, whispery kind of tone to him, Prodigy has more of this, like, you could feel the pain and the rawness in his voice. And truth be told, I think Prodigy, his voice and delivery is 90, maybe 85% of why people gravitated towards Prodigy and why he made a name for himself. You know, because when we talk in the next dimension, you know, there's something that's compelling about that, which I think helps when we talked about the personality part, because you're not getting a lot of autobiographical exposition or anything like that, but something in his voice, something in his vocal tone makes you feel like he believes what he's saying and there's truth to what he is willing to do. You know, we learn about Prodigy having sickle cell anemia a few years down the line, and you understand that this is a man who's lived with pain for a long time. And again, if you read his book, you understand that he's been involved in reckless activity for a while, and it kind of paints his voice as he speaks. So I think the New York accent on top of that, and just it's some people just have voices that work well for rap music, and you know, it always is a help when your beats fit the tone of your voice, and it's a good pairing. And you know, if your rhyme partner contrasts with yours, if your rhyme partner's voice contrasts with yours and sets you up for success, then you know, what can you do? By the time you hear Prodigy come on, you're ready for his verse. You know, like, it crackles like the same way the beats crackle when they come in. There's a seriousness in his tone, there's pain, and there's a rawness. There's a believability factor built in. And so with Havoc, there's also this equal menace, but it's a quieter menace. And I think you're ready for Havoc verses before you hear Prodigy verses or after. It's like there's a sense of completion after you hear both of them, no matter who the guest is on the album, because they have this kind of inherent chemistry. And yeah, I honestly believe those things are what grip you. It's a great combination of a duo that gets each other beat-wise and vocally. And so when you get a Big Noid, I mentioned this in the first video, his more boisterous sound is a great addition. When you get a Nas, who's somewhere in between Havoc and Prodigy's voices, if I ever had to describe Nas's tone, it's really, really in between Havoc and Prodigy is the best way you could ever put it. It works. When you get Raekwon, who's a different kind of tone, it goes well against that too. So all the guests here are well picked in that sense too, that their vocal tones and their voices match well and add new elements. I think it only gets a little muddled when you get the other infamous Mobb members who sound very close. They sound like derivatives of, you know, Big Noid, Havoc, and Prodigy's tones. Yeah, I mean, you get Ty Nitty, who has a gruff on his voice, so that works too, but you know, something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. Takes us to dimension 4, the flow. Now, really interesting, something I didn't notice until I went and re-listened to this album, is there was kind of this like inner Queens flow that, you know, was coming up or becoming popular, and I don't know if it's easily recognizable. It's something you really gotta put your ear to really catch, but it's not so much that Mobb Deep had a you know, continuous flow. They actually did this more talk style where the lines were kind of progressed in the same sentence structure. So it's not even a staircase flow. You're gonna hear them do this kind of listed flow, but conversational. It's like, it don't matter if you hada, babazida, whatever, you get your dun. It's the same flow pattern for every sentence, just back to back to back, going in like, you know, like a list format. And so a more extreme version of that from another Queens rapper would be the style that Noriega, you know, originally came out with and started, you know, running with, and then he just kind of really put a lot of emphasis on it because he was kind of belting out his verses. So Jose Luis gotcha, rolling guns and tons, say yo, we light a candle. And that's from that same school, that Queen school of rap, where it was sentence, and then a sentence, and then I get this, I rep this. That is the Mobb Deep flow pattern for the most part. That is their foundational flow. And there's different songs on here where that breaks up, you know, again, every now and then you'll get more syllable uses by each of them. There's even a part, I think on Get Dealt With or Dealt With Quick, where Havoc does a pickup flow that I only heard like Goody Mob members use, like Timo and Cujo. He's like, taking it to the source out of nowhere, he just says that. And in Prodigy, of course, when he is really in his bag on verses like Nighttime Vultures and, you know, his comeback verse on Hell on Earth, where there's more continuous connection between the syllables and the sentences. You get a little you get a little deviation from that. But you know, Extortion is a great example of that flow, that traditional Mobb Deep flow, where it's just like, you know, one sentence, two sentence, three sentence, same pattern. Bloodsport, another great example where you're gonna find that. Still Shining, Prodigy deviates a little bit more, and so, you know, it's verses like that, I think Still Shining and the other two I mentioned, that really made Prodigy a standout rapper who was considered one of the best in that era. Even though, you know, it's mostly the voice, but hearing that voice with a flow over the beats on those moments where you catch him on fire, those things are really captivating. And so you get that. And again, in contrast, when you have rappers with other flows, so Nas is on Give It Up Fast, his more seamless flow is a great compliment to what they're doing. Raekwon with his more ayo, kind of hasty flow is a compliment. And of course, Big Noise, as I keep mentioning, you know, boisterous. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5. Heartbeats, the flow. Now, Dimension 5, wordplay and bar intent. So wordplay happens here, but it's almost accidental wordplay. You know, Prodigy has, you know, some rhetorical devices in his bag that he dips into, but he's more gonna rely on descriptive language. And, you know, every now and then he'll do something like on Nighttime Vultures, he goes, you fly way off course, you lost direction, your comp ass. He breaks the word compass down into 2 words to make it an insult, but that's still playing on words. You get really, really sparse moments of like gems like that. His choice to use vocabulary words, like he likes the word apocalyptic, he likes to use this gothic imagery, and then of course, you know, violent imagery. He's telling you what weaponry he'll use to inflict the injury, what the injury will do to your body, what kind of bodily injury it's gonna be, how you're going to react to it. So yeah, your blood a curdle. But we mentioned in the repetition dimension in video 1, you will hear a lot of the same words. There's verses where, you know, he on Dealt With Quick, he says, you know, I put a hole in your face, and then like 4 or 5 words after that, he says face again, and tear your whole face off. Or, you know, on G.O.D. Father Part 3 or G.O.D. Part 3, he says fear like 4 times in one verse. So, you know, it reminds me of Corrupt, ironically, where they have this wide vocabulary, but they make it limited because, you know, there's a little bit of laziness with the writing. You know, you'll hear Corrupt say mental plick and molecular and a couple other words that he likes to dip into on a lot of different verses throughout his career. So the same way you're gonna hear Prodigy go to a lot of words. Havoc is a little bit more mindful of that, but Havoc does a lot of the repping. He does a little bit more repping than Prodigy does, so you're gonna hear QBC and, you know, a lot of those internal things more from Havoc. Havoc has cute lines. Again, on Drop a Gem on him, he calls Tupac Two-Knot. Some of his similes, they work effectively, but they're gonna be simple. You know, like, you're a Chihuahua, I'm a Rottweiler. And there's little things like that. But Prodigy has this cleverness every now and then. So when he's getting at Redman and Keith Murray, you know, and he says things like, you'll be missing much more than a fraction when it's time for action. It references the Redman song. I take it to any squad that's deaf, you know, or of course on verses like Hell on Earth, where he says, you know, I keep hearing that the mob's gonna get robbed. Well, here's the issue. It's a package deal. You come for me, you take some missiles along with that. You know, 4 mics on stage, 4 pound, however it's gotta go down, speakers leaking out sound, and you can leak on the ground. Like, the imagery and the cleverness, there's a heightened level there. This is not the kind of rap that any New York grimy hood rapper could come up with. And this is why Mobb Deep stands alone throughout history, because their particular brand was very specific to being descriptive of the violence they would do with a cleverness to it. So it's not the kind of cleverness that relied on humor, but there's cleverness is in there. We rob land like white man. There's lines in there where you get, these dudes are on something different. So something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5. Heartbeats, the wordplay and bar intent. Definitely plenty of intent. Dimension 6. Punchlines, poetic wisdom, overall quotability. So I mentioned Nighttime Vultures. Nighttime Vultures, Prodigy's verse did wind up getting the hip hop quotable of that month in the Source magazine when this album is out. He does a lot of description, using the metaphorical language to start off the verse, talking about, waking up, spreading his wings. The song's called Nighttime Vulture, so you get an idea of where he's taking. He's in his bag on that verse. With this album, there's gonna be more slick talk, and this is what I mean about the voice. Prodigy is from that class of, you hear a lot of people mention Styles P and a lot of Southern rappers for the same quality of it's their voice. Oh, I just like them because they say just so many real things. It's the imagery over everything. It's the brazenness and wild card factor of what Prodigy will say that will make you feel like you left the verse with some lines. So there's plenty of quotability here, even there's plenty of quotability in that sense. So you may not get a lot of poetic wisdom on this album, on Animal Instinct. They say tired of living life this way, but crime pays. But for how long? There's moments. Prodigy's self-awareness of being able to got to, but making sure that it's a challenge for anybody that's going to try to get them. That speaks to the level of cleverness you're dealing with. But quotability is there because people really gravitated towards a lot of lines on this album. We talk about that Hell on Earth comeback verse in particular, even though he says F rap, people love that stuff. And then, also Havoc has a line on here, that's how it is, and how it is kind of effed up. Speaking of Ras Kass, Ras winds up using that line as a hook on his follow-up album, Rassassination. So really interesting. This album left an impact for quotability. Still shining because it was a single for so long on the circuits, on the mixtape and the DJ circuits. There's a lot of quotables from that. Hell on Earth as a single got a lot of quotables, and Godfather Part 3, of course. All the singles left an imprint, at least with among the New York audiences that were raised hearing those songs on a regular, and of course among rap fans, Mobb Deep fans, and other rap peers. So the quotability factor is high, even though you're not getting a lot of punchlines. Your punchlines are very simplistic, basic kinds of punchlines. But it's that, what is Prodigy gonna say next? What is Havoc gonna say as well? And it's that thing that leaves the quotability factor pretty high. But something for you to consider on a scale from 1 to 5. Heartbeats takes us to Dimension 7, Concepts. Conceptually, this album doesn't go anywhere new for Mobb Deep or for hip hop. It's the sequel to The Infamous, and it's just more cinematic. But there's nothing, that I can think of here that's conceptual, taking you into angled territory where you have to look through this perspective to get it, or no creative ways of approaching anything. It's just straightforward for the most part. Even, you can argue that likening their rap to an apostle's warning to their enemies is conceptual in a way. Talking about, Hell on Earth is conceptual in a way, but you really be grasping at straws. So If any of you find conceptual material on this album that I overlooked, please point it out, put it in your ratings, something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That takes us to dimension 8, being the externalized content. How much outside of themselves are Havoc and Prodigy talking about? And then dimension 9, internalized content. How much within are they talking about? You could say there's a lot of within, right? Because they're always talking about how they feel towards enemies. Havoc lets you know how he feels about going to visit a woman for sure, and lets you know it's a continuation of his sentiment from the album before, just by the title alone, More Trife Life, or, you know, the ending bar of the song, you know, take my word, don't ever go. Yeah, it's just like, whoa, okay, that's really how you feel. You guys got trust issues, right? So you get a lot of that, but it's not coming from any exposition or any expository space where they're letting you know what they've been through to get to that point. It's more like, I've been through a lot. There's vague references to, I've been through a lot. Also, there's this idea that Mobb Deep relied a lot on their backup, on their team. There's this confidence that came from knowing that you roll 100 deep, or you got all of Queensbridge backing you up. It's not to say that they wouldn't get into stuff on their own, because if you read Prodigy's book, there's plenty passages where he talks about Havoc holding his own, punching people out, robbing people, and him, you know, going one-on-one, punching people out, jumping off stage, jumping on stage, punching people out. But I wonder, you know, the likelihood or the motivation to do so, if that's influenced at all by knowing that even if you do falter and stumble, you got, you know, you roll Mobb Deep, and you got a crew and a slew of people that come and, you know, seek retribution and avenge you right on the spot. Something to that. Mob mentality, no pun intended. All right, so yeah, I mean, you can consider that topical. The fact that, you know, Havoc is talking about, you know, this setup idea of not being able to trust women in this capacity. Hell on earth, you could consider that to be content on an external level, because they're talking about their surroundings, the environment they grew up, just their existence, the lifestyle they lead, but not in any focused way. It's just kind of this generalized statement, especially because Prodigy starts talking about being a stick-up kid and challenging any enemies to come get him, because he still loves violence and crime, and he's down anytime. It kind of deviates from any semblance of this being a topical song. They're all kind of saying the same things on every song, just with different shades and tones, like I mentioned in the first video, because of the production and where they want to take it, but not any real focused content. If you guys feel otherwise, please feel free to, you know, put it down in the comments. Let me know your ratings. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats, how much externalized content, and 1 to 5 heartbeats, how much internalized content, which takes us to the final dimension, dimension 10, storytelling. Boom. More Trife Life is the only official story here. Give It Up Fast, of course, Nas rhymes in story format because that is his default, that is his go-to. That's his style. So he starts off Give It Up Fast, you know, talking about being picked up from the airport, and goes off somewhere tangential, as Nas is prone to do. And, you know, Prodigy raps in second person a lot, as if he's speaking to his enemy, and so does Havoc. You know, Havoc does a little bit more third person rap. Prodigy is gonna be all first and second person, and you're not getting a lot of narratives from Prodigy. You're getting linear rap, but not narrative storytelling. Not on this album. Havoc gives you more Trife Life. He touches on abusive relationships, if you want to look at it that way, and, you know, he touches on, you know, the importance of protection, but it is a straightforward story. It's a pretty solid story, actually. I know someone said this is, in their opinion, the weakest song on the album, but, you know, I say, you know, it still sums up the feel of the album in one song if you had to pick at any song. So Yeah, something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That takes us to the conclusion of our Category 2 review of this classic album, Hell on Earth by Mobb Deep, one of the last 1996 albums that we're covering as this year comes to a close. And, got a few more in the canon, and then that's it. And we rev up and go somewhere differently. I mean, not to say that we'll never do albums from 1996, but it's been a whole string that we've been on since the fall, and thank you for coming for the ride. Y'all know what to do. We're still building this global hip-hop community. If you have not already, like and subscribe to the channel. Please hit that notification bell. Y'all know what it is. F a Rap Critic. They talk about it while I live it. Word to the mouth.